Now, to turn our attention to the international newspapers, Laurent Berchtaker is with us in studio. Laurent, firstly, emotions running high still in France following that deadly Christmas market shooting in Strasbourg. What are the French papers saying?
Well, it's been an extremely trying 24 hours, but now the French papers, well, France and Strasbourg as a whole are trying to move past this tragedy. On the L'Humanité's front page, we see flowers and candles being laid as tribute to the victims. But the headline, Après le choc, after the trauma, suggests the city has to move on. In an editorial, the paper denounces the political hijacking of the attack, with the right and the far right immediately calling for stricter border controls and immigration laws, and says that despite this traumatic event, nothing could be worse than to stop thinking for ourselves.
Meanwhile, of course, the manhunt continues. I imagine a lot of attention being given to that side of the story as well.
Well, it's been the focus of much of the French press today. And as we can see again with DNA, which is Dernières Nouvelles d'Alsace, a local newspaper, we see two policemen with the headline La Traque, the hunt. 700 policemen are currently mobilized in the search. We see a very similar front page for other newspapers, including Le Parisien and Aujourd'hui en France. It's basically the same picture, the same headline, which goes to show how important this manhunt really is. Le Parisien also has a detailed article on the search, calling the suspect France's new public enemy, and says that police consider this a race against the clock as they fear he might commit another attack if he's not caught soon.
And of course, worryingly, especially given the fact that we don't even know if he's still actually in the country.
That's right, and the story's also being picked up in Germany. We see German tabloid Bild showing a picture of Sharif Shekat on its front page, and with an article that dives into his past run-ins with the law, and that includes a 14-month stint in a German prison before he was deported back to France in 2017. Now, of course, German authorities fear he may have crossed back into Germany.
Of course. Well, let's move on for now to the United Kingdom. Theresa May, of course, surviving a vote of no confidence. British papers, I imagine, headlining on that.
Well, the big question now for the British press is whether Theresa May is getting out of this vote stronger or weakened. And while different papers have different takes on this, as we see, some calling it a victory for the Prime Minister, others a stay of execution. For example, The Independent has its front page with Theresa May looking towards the future. May wins leadership battle. And well, the article argues that this gives her maybe some legitimacy to press forward with her Brexit deal. Looking at other papers, the Daily Express and the Daily Mail have very similar headlines, calling on Tories to let May get on with her job after this failed attempt to oust her. But for many other newspapers, May was weakened by this vote. And well, the Daily Mirror, for instance, calls it a lame duck for Christmas, referring to the fact that May said she would step down before the next elections, making her, in effect, a lame duck. It's a term we see a lot of in the papers today, as well as the term zombie government. We have this cartoon by a cartoonist, Dave Brown, showing Theresa May as a zombie walking out of a graveyard. And the idea is that despite winning the vote, she's still a dead woman walking in a way, not conservative enough for conservatives, too conservative for liberals, and that she's staggering towards her demise.
Okay, well, let's finish up with a good news story for those of us who are technophobes.
Well, a few months ago, an American company released footage of a robot doing parkour, jumping over obstacles and so forth, and this freaked out a lot of internet users. They called it terrifying and immediately calling on the end of mankind by robot invasion. But what happened yesterday in Russia at a robotics forum should reassure them. In this event, which was covered by a Russian state TV, we saw a new hyper-modern robot prototype, which was praised by commentators at the time. But internet users started asking some tough questions. Where are the robot's sensors? Why is it making so many unnecessary movements? And how come in certain pictures we can see a human neck inside? Well, it turns out it was a man inside a robot costume the whole time. and even the commentators were fooled. Now, to be fair, it's quite an elaborate costume. It costs around 4,000 euros, and it's designed to give the impression, the illusion, that before you stands a real robot. Well, mission accomplished in that case.
Indeed, some of his moves were quite robotic, but if some of them then were just a little bit too fluid when you look at them again,
bit too much groove.
With that knowledge that it is a man inside. Laurent Bersteker, thanks a lot for that wrap-up of the international papers.